Hey, welcome back. You ready to dive into something pretty different this time?
Always. The stranger, the better, I say.
Right. So today we're going deep on something really unique. Artificial mummification.
You mean embalming, like ancient Egypt and all that?
Yeah, yeah. Embalming, but not just the historical stuff. We found this investigation and, well, it goes into some pretty wild territory.
Oh, tell me more. I'm intrigued already.
It's from this YouTube channel. Grifasi Investigations English. They do these hypnotic regression sessions.
Hypnosis. Okay, now we're talking. So what did they find out about mummification under hypnosis?
Well, this particular session, it's titled, get this, 77 Anastasia, C degrees 276, P degree 1. Mummification external hypnoperator Ioana Sima Grifasi method. Catchy, right?
Sure, rolls right off the tongue.
But the method is actually really interesting. They put the subject, a woman named Anastasia, under hypnosis before even telling her the topic.
Oh, smart. To avoid any, preconceived ideas or leading questions,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. So she's under, and then they start with a standard set of questions,
Mm-hmm.
really structured. But then they let her kind of roam free, explore whatever comes up.
Okay, I'm hooked. So where do we even begin with this hypnotic deep dive into mummification?
Well, right off the bat, Anastasia gets this image, this vision of a pyramid.
Classic mummification imagery, right? Pyramids, tombs, pharaohs.
Yeah, but hold on. It's a pyramid, but it's mirrored underground. And she senses this isn't just, limited to Egypt or those well-known sites. It's like this widespread thing happening all over the planet energetically and very hush-hush secret.
Whoa. So it's not just about the physical structures we see above ground.
Nope. It's deeper than that. More about, well, energy.
The energy of mummification. That's interesting because it suggests there's something more going on than just preserving the physical body, right?
Exactly. According to Anastasia, the intention behind ancient mummification wasn't really about keeping the body intact for, earthly reasons.
No. What was it for then?
To contain the person's energy, sort of trap it within these walls.
So it's not about the body itself, it's about what it contains.
Yeah, the essence, the energy. And it wasn't really for the benefit of the person who died either. More like a ritual.
A ritual. Okay, so how does that change our understanding of mummification? Because if it's a ritual, then we have to ask, who is it for?
That's where it gets even weirder. Anastasia perceived this whole embalming thing as orchestrated, but not by humans alone.
Orchestrated by.
Some kind of influence from, and I'm using her words here, the metaphysical space. She even mentioned this term egregore, which is basically like a thought form, an energy created by a bunch of people believing the same thing, a kind of collective entity.
Like the collective belief in the power of mummification created this egregore, and that egregore in turn influenced the practice.
Exactly. This shared belief, this energy is like a feedback loop.
So we're not just talking about preserving a body, we're talking about potentially manipulating energy, consciousness, even the afterlife, all because of this shared belief system.
That's what the investigation suggests.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Where do we go from here?
All right, now let's talk about the subliminal part. That's how they referred to it in this section. Think of it as like the soul, the consciousness, the part of a person that doesn't just disappear when they die.
Got it. So what happens to the subliminal part in artificial mummification?
It gets trapped. That energy, that essence is preserved, but on the ground, attached to this reality. And there's this invisible string, they say, that keeps it tied here.
Like an anchor.
Exactly, like an anchor. It can't move on freely, can't transition to wherever it's supposed to go.
Right. What about natural mummification, where a body is preserved, but not intentionally, by human hands?
They address that too. In those cases, it's different. They said if the consciousness is, aware, knowledgeable, it just detaches, no problem.
Makes sense. But what if it's not knowledgeable, if it's still clinging to earthly things?
Then the connection thins out naturally as the body decomposes. Eventually, the subliminal part gets freed, but it's based on its own decision, its own state of being.
So it's about interference. Natural mummification lets things unfold organically, but artificial mummification is like forcing a soul to stay put.
That's the gist of it.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this energy-trapping ritual, potentially orchestrated by a powerful thought form. Where does reincarnation fit into all of this?
Well, Anastasia felt that the connection to reincarnation was, at least at first, only partial.
Partial? How so?
Okay, so they said the connection with artificial mummification comes from the beliefs of the person being mummified.
Like if they believed that mummification would help them in the afterlife, that belief itself creates the link.
Yeah, and that's coupled with, the metaphysical influence we talked about, that egregore. Like, they both contribute.
So their belief that the ritual is connected to something bigger, something beyond this life, that's what makes the connection to reincarnation.
That's what you're saying. But with natural mummification, there's no perceived connection to reincarnation at all.
Because it's not an intentional act, there's no belief system behind it, it just happens naturally.
That seems to be the key difference. It's the intent, the belief that ties it all together.
Fascinating. So let's move on to ancient Egypt specifically. What was the metaphysical vibe there during the heyday of mummification?
Brace yourself. This is where it gets really intense. Anastasia described a massive agglomeration of entities in the metaphysical plane. Basically a huge gathering of, energetic beings almost merging into this one giant entity.
A giant entity made up of smaller entities, and this was connected to the ancient Egyptians.
Big time. It was linked to their minds, and they saw it as a source of, salvation, deliverance.
So this mega entity was messing with their heads.
Oh, yeah. It was actively influencing them, inducing hallucinations, visual illusions, making its presence known, and creating this bond, this dependence.
So it's not just that the Egyptians believed in this entity was actively manipulating them into believing.
Right. And in that context, mummification wasn't just a cultural thing. It was part of a bigger scheme to please this entity.
Wow. A cosmic power play? It makes the whole removing the brain thing even more creepy.
You're thinking about that too. Okay, so they talked about that too. Why the Egyptians tossed the brain but kept the heart.
Yeah, what was up with that?
They said it's all about emphasizing the emotional body and its connection to this reality, to emotional ties. The heart, being the center of emotions, was considered more important for the, afterlife journey.
But the brain, the seat of reason, of individuality, why get rid of that?
They interpreted it as an attempt to remove the mental body, the will, the capacity for choice.
So without the brain, the soul is more easily manipulated, more pliable.
That's the idea they put forward. Now, this is where the free exploration part starts to get really, really interesting. They focus on this agglomeration of entities.
All right, let's talk entities. What did we learn about these beings?
Well, first, Anastasia estimated there were around 158 of them. And the dominant type, reptilian.
Reptilians, huh? So how are they pulling off these hallucinations and illusions?
Through frequencies, apparently. They were tapping into specific frequencies emanating from the people, like doubt, uncertainty, anger, even hope.
So they were feeding off of those negative emotions.
In a way, yeah. And it all started with intrusive thoughts.
So where were these thoughts coming from? The entities themselves, or were they being amplified from within the people?
Anastasia perceived a common consciousness, a shared mental space above the people.
Yeah.
And the entities were influencing that, messing with people's thoughts, causing confusion, maybe even psychosis in some cases.
That common consciousness, was it something specific or just a general term?
When they said Nikragor, that resonated more. So not the whole collective unconscious, but a focused energy built from the beliefs of this specific group of Egyptians.
Okay, so this specific method of frequency manipulation, when was it happening?
Around the year 18. But, and this is key, they said it's not necessarily linked to our AD or BC timeline.
Time is fluid, man.
Yeah.
So year 18, whatever that means, what specific illusions were being fed to the Egyptians at that time?
A huge fear of death, this intense clinging to their physical bodies and surroundings, and at the same time, a feeling of vulnerability, like they weren't safe even in familiar places.
A potent cocktail of fear and insecurity. What was the solution presented within that manipulated common consciousness?
A need for help or dependence on something external, something beyond themselves.
Sounds like a setup for manipulation, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And here's how they tied it back to embalming. Those entities, they love it because it traps the subliminal part, makes it easier to access, to influence, to basically mess with. And that can, feed into the reincarnation cycle, keep those souls under their thumb.
So mummification isn't just a physical act, it's a metaphysical trap.
That's the disturbing implication, yeah. Oh, and they also analyzed the DNA of someone performing an embalming.
Okay, I'm guessing it wasn't 100% human.
Nope. 80% a different type of human, stronger, taller, bigger head, smaller chin, and 20% falconoid.
Falconoid, like bird DNA.
Yep. And they suggested a collaboration between falconoids and reptilians in the mummification process, especially where both entities were prevalent.
So a multi-species operation, all focused on controlling human souls. What about the embalmer themselves? Did they get anything out of it?
A temporary mental peace, a break from intrusive thoughts. like a reward, reinforcing the whole cycle.
Makes you think about the motivations behind rituals, doesn't it? Not just the big picture stuff, but the personal level too.
Absolutely. Okay, so then the investigation switched gears, looked at the different embalming, this one in Latin America, around the year 5, again, with that time caveat.
Year 5, got it. Different time, different place, different kind of embalming.
This one involved consent. A 15-year-old tribal leader, he agreed to it beforehand.
Consented to his own mummification. Interesting. Who performed the ritual in this case?
7, like, wise elders, or people chosen by the leader.
And what did they do? Any similarities to the Egyptian methods?
Not really. They scratched the skin, rubbed soil into the wounds, and poured this liquid down his throat.
Liquid. What was in it?
Plants and a crushed green crystal, non-organic, from a fallen big rock, they said.
What was the crystal for?
They saw it as a link between the physical and something above, like a higher realm.
Yeah.
Even the performers didn't really get the physical effects of it, just the symbolic meaning.
And incantations. Were they chanting or speaking during the ritual?
Oh yeah, incantations were in all the mummification rituals they looked at. In this case, it was something like, take him above, make him your own.
Wow. So what happened to his body after they poured that liquid down his throat?
It decomposed or melted, starting with the stomach.
And how did they wrap him?
Big leaves, not white sheets. Now, metaphysically, things were getting really interesting. They said there's a mirroring effect.
Mirroring. How so?
Whatever they did to the body, it happened to the subliminal part too, keeping it anchored in one place.
So even with consent, it's still a form of trapping the soul.
Seems that way. And guess who was back? The entities. 7 of them, controlling the 7 performers. 6 reptilians, 1 insectoid.
So consent or not, they were still pulling the strings. What happened to the leader's subliminal part because of all this?
Well, because of his consent, it was bound by energetic strings, couldn't move freely.
And that crystal, did it have a metaphysical effect too?
Apparently, those microparticles got activated by some unknown tech and turned into, like, implants in his subliminal body.
Implants. Yikes. What about the incantations? Did they do anything on the metaphysical level?
It seemed like they mostly affected the other 43 people who were there watching.
Like a placebo, reinforcing their belief in what was happening.
Yeah, that's the idea. Because the entities were already doing their own ritual through, possessing the performers.
And what were those 43 people doing during all of this?
Standing in a circle, swaying, humming at a low vibration. They didn't really get into the purpose of the humming, though.
Okay, so 6 months later, what's the state of this young leader's soul? Did he ascend to the greats like he wanted?
He thought he did. He had this illusion of being part of something bigger, but he was still stuck, bound by those strings, along with others, in this fake metaphysical space. And he didn't even realize it.
And what was the purpose of keeping them trapped like that?
To influence living people, mostly through persuasion, and to act as ancestors, giving guidance in reincarnation spaces.
So even in the afterlife, the manipulation continues. And what about the leader's next reincarnation?
He reincarnated with this sense of purpose, this huge mission, but he was sacrificed as a baby.
That's awful. But then the investigation did something really unexpected. They went back in time and talked to the leader, Cardi, before he consented.
Yep. At 47 years old, praying by the ocean at night, he was super devoted, wanted to be more, And at that point, his DNA was 90% human, 10% insectoid.
Insectoid DNA. Okay, things are getting weirder.
He even felt this tube, this connection from his heart to the sky, and he thought that was where his, inner knowing came from.
So they showed him what they had seen, his death, his entrapment, the whole thing.
They did. And he felt betrayed, realized things weren't what they seemed. He finally understood that his prayer, his consent, was what led to that messed up future.
But they didn't just leave him hanging, did they? They offered him hope.
They reminded him he could change things. His future, even his past and present. They made him question that need to be more.
It's all about choice, isn't it? Even when faced with seemingly insurmountable forces.
They even showed him alternate futures based on different choices he could make.
Let me guess. One where he doesn't pray that night.
You got it. He gets more involved in his community, lives to 68, meets a reptilian, but feels unsure. Another where he talks to himself, has a bunch of self-realizations, lives to 72, and explores the beyond alone. And guess which one he preferred?
The one where he talks to himself.
Bingo. And after that interaction, he was way calmer, more fulfilled, and his alien DNA seemed to decrease as he had those realizations.
Like awareness itself shifted his genetic makeup.
Wild.
Right.
And finally, they addressed modern mummification. Guess what? It's still happening.
Really? Where?
North Pole, Middle East, maybe Alaska. And it's not just those entities anymore. It's humans under their control in army and science uniforms.
A whole new level of creepy. And what's the goal now? Still soul trapping?
No, this time it's more about exploiting the physical body, trafficking weird experiments.
Wow. That's a pretty dark picture of modern mummification. So what's the takeaway from all of this? What have we learned from this hypnotic deep dive?
It's not just about preserving bodies. There's this whole energetic, metaphysical dimension, both in the past and present.
And this idea of unseen influences, shaping our beliefs and rituals, manipulating us without us even realizing it.
Bacardi's story, it shows that even when things seem set in stone, we have choices, and awareness is power.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What unseen forces might be at play in our lives right now? What beliefs and desires might be influenced by something we're not even aware of?
That's the question, isn't it? What's really driving our choices? Something to ponder, for sure. And that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for exploring this wild stuff with us.
Until next time.
See you then.